Hello, and welcome to the Geek on My Sleeve channel again, where we do weekly book reviews, summary recaps, and live book discussions called Geek Outs every Sunday, 8 p.m. Eastern, unless we're playing with others. Then stay tuned for Sunday altering times. Today, I've got Carl with me. We're going to be doing a spoiler free review of A Mark of Kings, The Shattered Rain Region, Book 1 by Bryce O'Connor and Luke Chimilenko, narrated by Nick Odell. Ah, quite a mouthful there. So, we know Luke Chimilenko. This is our first time for Bryce O'Connor. Very excited. This is going to count towards our 52 book challenge. If you enjoy book reviews or any book-ish content, please like and subscribe. The audio length comes in at 18 hours, 38 minutes. The page number is 412.
As Peter already said, huge fans of Luke Chimilenko. This is our first Bryce O'Connor book. This is a different genre for us, or at least when it comes to Luke Chimilenko. But this book, at least in regards to Kindle, was very well received in the following genres. Number one bestseller in dark fantasy, dragons and myths, military fantasy, and action adventure. So, as we've been kind of playing in the space, we've come to appreciate that there are a lot of different sub genres. But if somebody asked me what I would put this in, it's an epic fantasy book. Would you agree with that, Pete?
Yeah, the way the first one's set up, it's building up if it would be an epic fantasy. But I don't think you can really claim that title until you're like 6 or 7 books deep, right?
And so, with that in mind, as we go through and give our ratings, rankings, synopsis, etc., at least for me personally, I really have to put on the this is an epic fantasy book cap, if you will, just because the feel and the vibes are very different than some of the other books we like to read. And we'll get into that a little bit later. So for age rating, would put this book in the teen category. Would certainly feel comfortable giving this to young adults. There are some more mature themes and um, concepts in the book. Nothing overly graphic, but as we listed up above, military fantasy, action adventure, dark fantasy, you kind of get some of those more mature themes. So for overall rating, we do all these out of 5 stars. And I know there's haters out there. Sometimes we give half stars, but out of 5 stars overall, this book came in as a 4 star for me. How about you, Pete?
I'm a little disappointed there's only one. So that's for what this book was overall, I'd put it at a 4. Um, it's probably change over time after I get more of the books involved and get to see how much was really developed in the first book. But Luke Chimilenko, here I am.
Only one book for now. There are going to be more in the series. Typically, we like to wait a little bit longer. But I think we picked this up on a daily deal. And again, Luke Chimilenko, instant buy for us. So, depending on the book, we have a number of different categories we like to go through and analyze. One of the ones we're going to be covering is scaling and progression. My first impressions of it was it felt a bit slower, yet with epic fantasy books in mind, having a number of them under my belt, for scaling and progression, I felt it was a solid 4 stars for me. How about you, Pete?
Yeah, yeah, scaling progression was good. And the re or 4 stars as well. And the reason is they have a very intricate way of explaining things. And essentially, you've got like living through it, and then you've got like a mentor explaining it how it should be, but then beepy to beep magic, and you have, dreams and visions and other things that are getting you in the moment, and just it had a very unique way of accelerating the explanation, but at the same time it was kind of all backstory just to get us to our starting position. So it was good. Felt a little slow, potentially epic fantasy, but it covered a lot for me and connected a lot of darts, so that we can get started.
It's the first book in an epic fantasy series, and I think that's where the slowness kind of feeling came from because there's a lot of laying down the groundwork and build up, and we got that in this book. Um, you talked a little bit about it. One of the other categories we want to get into is world building. And for me, I felt like this was a strength for the book. They did a good job um, giving us enough in the beginning, and then as the story progressed, found good ways to kind of incorporate other elements of the wider, larger world. Um, Trying to avoid spoilers, but just through different little pieces. There was some showing, there was a bit more telling through dialogue in a way to do the world building, but in my opinion, it was tastefully done. So world building, I'd probably put 4.5 for me out of 5 stars. How about you, Pete?
Yeah, I'd probably give it a 4.5, and yet again, just kind of loops into scaling and progression for me. The way we end up with so many different elements, and so you have your main character who has certain experiences, and then you have your mentor who has different experiences, and then we go Captain Planet, and with our powers combined, it ends up adjusting your main character's perspective because now he's got a new light to look through. And so it takes it and it brings it very, I guess, real world esque. Like, okay, that makes sense. And then it adds their, dark fantasy elements to it. And now it's like, okay, now that makes a little bit more sense. And so, plus, like, it's a it's a quest or it's a action adventure. So we're traversing quite a bit of, the world. So that's very exciting.
They did it well. And they're, like we said earlier, laying down a lot of the groundwork, building the world, and then just giving us enough nuggets of information to let us know there will be more development there in the book. Um, the other category we want to get into for this book is foreshadowing. And I'm curious and want to hear your thoughts on this first, Pete, before I give my feedback. What were your thoughts on the foreshadowing for this book?
So for me, the foreshadowing was pretty heavy. Um, I would put it, yet again, 4.5, just because it gives me the feel of history repeating itself, and it leaves off where we're going to get a lot more history. Because for where we are, we kind of have an understanding of like what our part was or our character's part were in history prior, but there was a section that's kind of like hinted at, but then we end up there to traverse it. So I there's a lot of build up all across the board, And if you can keep straight, what is currently taking place and what had taken place before and what is, a mentor's back in my day moment, there's a lot of like, if history is going to repeat itself, if we're going to get the other side of the coin due to where we are, and there's a lot of foreshadowing. Maybe it's just because I enjoy the genre so much and the potential for the fantasy characters and the potential for the magic system that I'm more excited about it. But yeah, there's a lot of writing in the sand, so to speak.
Yeah. I feel that foreshadowing was a strength for this book as well. I would put it at a 4 stars. Um, Pretty typical for epic fantasy is early on in the series, you get kind of that origin story and you get the foreshadowing and the history, right? And, you know, looking back at the book, there is a lot of that foreshadowing, simply because, like you said, with like history doomed to repeat itself as we get more and more of the backstory and start to see more and more of the similarities at play. Um, it starts to create those questions and potential promises for you. Like, is that the direction we're going with this? Um, so yeah, definitely a lot of foreshadowing, a lot of teasing at potentials in the book, in the series. And yeah, um, final thoughts on the book. Are we doing a Geek Out stream? Haha, joke's on you. We already did a Geek Out stream. We'll do our part to throw that up in the cards above.
We are current with this book. So if you guys get current, then we can continue this journey together, pending it is a collaboration event and they both have other projects going on at the moment.
They're trying to build this larger world, right? Some of the other books we read and areas we play in, the scope is a lot smaller, right? This is book one of an epic fantasy series. They are, it's an origin story. They're doing everything they can to get us set up to play in this fantasy realm.
I
Bye.